Roger, are you ready for tonight's Communication Steroids podcast?
Why, Tim, indeed I am, by golly.
Well, welcome to another exciting edition. I think the more we do of these, the looser we're going to get. Of course, it does help that we've been upstairs watching the opening game of the Trailblazers season and drinking a cold one.
Yes. Imbibing an adult beverage, as it were.
Yeah, and that was a while ago, like all of 15 minutes or so.
That's right.
And anyway, we welcome you to Communication Steroids. We wanted to talk about something we've touched on in a couple of our previous podcasts, and I think we even touched upon them in our online program, if you check that out, and that is written communications. We've talked about email, for instance, but we're going to talk a little bit more about it tonight. Business letters, proposals, and this is business written communication. Now, obviously, if you're instant messaging to your daughter or son who's a teenager or a friend of theirs across the country, different rules apply, and there may be no rules of those. I don't know.
But we're actually talking about when you want to be professional and formal.
And that's right. And under a business situation, when you are emailing someone, for instance, let's start with email. Well, one of the things that you always say is it's forever.
It's forever. Email is forever. I can't emphasize that enough. Even when you're emailing a friend on the job, you have no idea what the network administrator may pull up because they have access. They almost always have access. They can even log your keystrokes most often.
And this is important because you've actually worked for one of the companies, which is a large nationwide international company, and you know that they had some very strict rules. Now, I've never been in that specific situation because I've never worked for a company that corporation that large, but certainly as email came in, I worked for smaller companies, and maybe the rules didn't apply quite as much, but you have to be aware of what the situation is.
And in fact, this is a communications related, and we should relate it. And that is simply this. I got an email from corporate headquarters once because it had come to their attention that I had been viewing gambling sites while at work.
Okay.
What had happened was during break time and lunchtime, you were allowed to go wherever you wanted to. And even though I had the ability to peruse the internet at will because of my position and stature with the company, I wanted to set a good example. So I confined my personal use of the internet to the scheduled times. And I'd go to sports sites because I really love sports. Mm-hmm. And so I'd go and check out college football news or whatever, see how the Ducks were doing. And one of the pop-ups would be a gambling site.
An ad for a gambling site.
An ad for a gambling site. Well, those keystrokes, those pop-ups are logged. And so I get an email from corporate headquarters said, that expressed concern because I had been perusing gambling sites.
There was a time I wrote a personal email to someone I knew that worked at a company much like yours, a big company, and I don't know what topic it was, whether it was, let's go together to lunch or something. And I think I was sharing something that I thought was funny that just came along. It was personal, it was not a business. And she said business-related communication. And she wrote back and says, "This is great. I love to hear from you, but if you're going to send me this kind of stuff, please send it to my home address." And she was very nice about it, but I went, "Oh yeah, people are watching over your shoulder all the time."
Yeah, but personal communications, most companies will allow you to receive personal communications at work, personal emails, requests for lunch, that kind of thing. But you should be real careful about content. There was a fellow at the same company who was fired because someone sent him an email which he pulled up on his desktop, which was visible over his shoulder. That email included a photograph, a hearty har-har, laugh it up, yuck it up photograph with inappropriate content of a sexual nature.
Yeah.
It was viewed over his shoulder, and to avoid the lawsuit for a hostile work environment, they fired him.
Yeah. Yeah, so that can happen. So let's talk about the email communication itself and some of the tips we've got. Obviously, you want to be clear and concise about your goal and your way you're communicating that. So know what you're going to say as you sit down to write your email communication.
Absolutely true. I wanted to make an overall point about business communications in general, and that is, generally speaking, even the business letter, but this is especially true of email. We've sort of gotten into the email environment, and what I mean to say by that is all business communications is far less formal than it once was.
It's true, yeah.
Even the business letter is not the "we regret to inform you" or "we are pleased to inform you."
It's not like a form letter anymore,
It isn't. And if it sounds like one, your business communication is in trouble. You ought to deformalize it, personalize it. That's what people are looking for. That's what they want. And that's where the business world is going today. They don't use the stock standard phrases anymore. Delete them from your vocabulary and delete them from your email and from your business business letters.
I think the most important thing is who is receiving this communication. For instance, if you're writing an email to someone that you've known for 4 or 5 years because they've been a client and you have a personal relationship to a certain degree with them, or at least you know you've met them a number of times and you're comfortable with them, obviously that doesn't have to be nearly as formal as someone you're meeting online in an email for the very first time.
Know your audience. That is always an important, no matter what kind of communication you're doing. That's rule number one.
And if you're going to send it out to one person, that's different than sending it out to 10,000 people in an email newsletter blast. Much different.
And there are some email considerations that are always important. Grammar and punctuation still count. They still matter. I know that you have a business acquaintance who sends you email that is never punctuated in any way.
This is true. And it's always been very annoying when we do projects with him, and it's an off and on thing. I get emails from this gentleman who doesn't capitalize anything. He doesn't bother to put periods in. He doesn't put commas or quotation marks, anything. And there was one time I just got a run-on sentence that was 5 or 6 lines long, and I could not. I read it 4 times, couldn't figure out exactly what he was trying to say, and I wrote it back and said, "What do you mean?"
Yeah, punctuation exists for a reason, and the reason, it adds meaning. It just does. It adds meaning.
So email, very important to get your message across, as in any communication. You can be informal to a certain degree, but all the rules apply. Grammar, punctuation, put indentations in your paragraphs, or at least put some space in between one paragraph and the next. And you know what really works in email communication is a lot of white space. In other words,
white space. Absolutely.
I will break up what would be a normal paragraph of 3 or 4 or 5 sentences into 1 or 2 or 3 paragraphs, so that you can have some white space, so that you can easily read it.
Well, you've actually brought something that brought up something that is really near and dear to my heart, and that is some of the technical elements of creating a readable page, just in terms of the layout. I love thinking about layout. One of the things that you need to concern yourself with in producing a readable page is the white space that you were talking about. Another thing is color. Red is hard to read. Yeah. It's just hard to read. Yeah. Use black or dark blue for the most part. Darker colors tend to be easier to read. People love, to put in the vibrant reds. Yellow vanishes on a white page.
No capitals. Or don't capitalize everything, because that's yelling.
No all caps. Type, yeah. That's yelling in email etiquette. It's yelling. So no all caps. And when you're choosing a font, choose an easy to read font, and most often choose what they call a serif or serif font.
Yeah.
Sans serif, that means it doesn't have that little curly Q thing on the letters, are harder to read. It tends to be easier to read fonts with a serif.
Serif. Yeah. Okay. Well, that's kind of neat that we got to cover all this information here. I can't believe that we're already 8 or 9 minutes into our podcast, and our limit is about 10 minutes. So right. I think we should wrap it up and see if there's another game on upstairs. You think?
Sounds great.
Roger, thanks again for joining me on Communication Steroids podcast.
Always a pleasure.